Okay, so now you're going to answer a question on validation, and this obviously is relating to the scenario. So it says, explain what is meant by validation of data and describe how data input to the tyre ID and price fields should be validated. Now for this, obviously, you're going to need to consider all your validation types. So in this question, they're going to expect you to name one or two validation types. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly explain each validation type. So now, if you would like to obviously revise validation types and have a quick read of them, you can go to the book, and they're basically from pages 17 to 18 of the book. Okay, so now firstly, there's your presence check. So these are mandatory fields that need to be filled in. So for example, when you go online and you fill in a form, you will see the fields that have got the red star by them, where you have to fill in things like your name, your address, the city you live in, the postcode that you're in, email address, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's a presence check. So that's going to check that the data is actually there in the first place. The second check is a range check. So this is when you check if the data is greater than or less than. So for example, somebody may need to access something in a database, or maybe they want to watch a film online, and it may ask their age. And the range check will check that if their age is less than, or well, yes, less than, say, the age of 18, it won't let them go any further. Or their age must be, for example, greater than or equal to 18. The next, sorry, I forgot to say as well, for a presence check, they may also check, for example, that there are certain things in the form. So, for example, if they're filling out an email address, they would check that there is text before and after the @ sign. Okay, so the next check is a type check. Okay, so this is when it's checking that the data is of the correct format. So, for example, if you needed to put your date of birth in, okay, they would check that the data is entered as a date. Now, a type check is not to be confused with a format check. Okay, so they would define a certain type of data. So an age would have to be an integer. Okay, so they wouldn't expect someone to write in 18.6, meaning, 18 years old and 6 months, for example. The next type is a length check. So this is checking that the data is a certain number of characters long. So for example, passwords would be, say, 6 characters long at least. The next check is a format check. Okay, so the format check would maybe check that the data is of a certain type. So for example, there has to be 4 numbers, then there has to be 2 letters. Okay, or they would check, for example, that if they was putting in an email address, the @ symbol would be there. Then there's a lookup check. So this is when this is testing to see if the data exists on a certain list. So, for example, gender would be responded with male or female. Okay, or maybe that they're checking for rules. So, for example, X, P, M, or D could be entered. So it could be like a fail, a pass, a merit, or distinction. Okay, and anything else would be unaccepted. Then you have your consistency check. So this is checking that data already exists, is basically consistent with each other in the fields. So gender could be male or female. A consistency check would prevent F from being entered into a title, for example, when it should be Mr. or Mrs. The final check is check digit. Okay, this one's a little more complex. Okay, so this is the checking that a digit check is a number or a letter that is added to the end of identification. when the data is being put in. So so it is a form of redundancy check because the check digit is kind of redundant. Okay, so basically they're verifying calculations through product codes in check digits. Now these are mainly used in barcodes. Okay, so they're not really I would say it's not really relevant to most database questions unless they're specifically asking about databases. Okay, right, so they're the types of checks. So looking back at these checks, so what check do you think would be valid for this data entry? Okay, so you may need to look at the scenario again. Okay, and then check maybe, for example, like would a range check suit the tire ID? Okay, maybe, for example, it could be a format check. I could be totally wrong, okay, but you would need to figure this one out.